everyone. This is the fourth Meet the Filmmakers chat, directly broadcast live on YouTube and on our Facebook page. Just immediately my computer fell. It got shocked when I said it's the fourth already. The festival has officially opened as of 1 minute past midnight this morning, and it's the Socially Relevant Film Festival New York 8th Annual Edition, hashtag SRFF 2021. So to find out information about the festival, all you have to do is go to the website www.ratedsrfilms.org to see the way to get to the 63 films from 30 you this year, all revolving around 12 very important and pressing human interest issues that are climate change, disability seen in a positive light, empowering women and girls, forms of protest, genocide and survival, human trafficking, home and belonging, indigenous populations, and migration, it's a very important topic, race, prejudice, discrimination, youth and children, LGBTQ rights, and you see all these different themes arranged thematically on the streaming website, which we are using this year to stream the films directly to you all week. If you have purchased an all-access pass or a single ticket for any particular film, you have the possibility, you have the freedom to watch that one film or the ensemble of what we are offering anytime during the week, which has already started, all the way until Sunday. And we might grant a couple of extra days to allow you to see the winning films. We'll see about that. I cannot promise, but let's hope everybody is able to join in. If you had purchased, let me take this opportunity and make this announcement. If you had purchased an early bird all access pass, a code has been emailed you. If you say you haven't received it, please look in your trash or spam folder. We mailed it at least 6 times. A few times out of Film Freeway, the ticketing site, and a few times from the festival email. So please look for that code, because once you get onto the streaming website, which is Spark, accessible through the festival website that is streaming here in front of you, ratedsrfilms.org, you are going to be able to go to the red button, press on it, and once you select what you want to see, or if you are purchasing the all access pass, at the bottom of the page where you have to make your payment, you're going to put the code. When you put the code, the amount you're supposed to pay is magically going to turn into 0, because you've already paid and purchased your ticket. At that point, all the films will say, watch now, watch now, watch now, with recognizing the email with which you had signed in. And then you can click watch now and have a wonderful time enjoying the films of these incredible filmmakers. I am Nora Armani, in case you haven't had a chance to read on the screen by now, founding artistic director of the Socially Relevant Film Festival New York, which I started 8 years ago in 2013, as a reaction to the proliferation of violence on screen and off. And instead of just concentrating on films that deal with nonviolence, we opened it to include all sorts of social issues, which I just named. So without further ado, let me introduce you our moderator today. And this is Neha Mulay. Her bio says she's an Australian Indian writer and is a current MFA candidate in poetry at New York University. Her poems have appeared and are forthcoming in Black Warrior Review, The Main Review, and Sand Journal, among other publications. Her essays have appeared in Feminartsy, Overland Online, and Honeysuckle. She is the managing editor of Honeysuckle Media and the web editor of the Washington Square Review. And we are happy to say that Honeysuckle magazine is one of our media partners on this edition of the festival. And we are thrilled to have Neha moderate this chat with the wonderful filmmakers we have brought together to you today in this session, which is Forms of Protest. So I will give the mic to Neha and ask her to unmute herself. And of course, everybody, please remember to keep yourselves mute when not speaking and then unmute when you are. So, and I am going to see you later.
Thank you very much, Nora, for that introduction. Thank you to our audiences for tuning in. And of course, thank you to our filmmakers for attending today and creating their wonderful, highly relevant films. So to start off, I'd just like to invite the filmmakers on the panel to introduce themselves, please. And Nelson, perhaps you'd like to go first.
Caught me off guard. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Nelson Varas. I'm a Puerto Rican social psychologist and a faculty member at Florida International University's Global and Sociocultural Studies Department.
Thank you, Nelson. Judith, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. My name is Judith Ehrlich. It's 6 a.m. where I am in Australia, which is where you're from. I am a filmmaker. This is the third, The Boys Who Said No is the third of a triptych I've done on nonviolence and war. And this film focuses on the resistors, war resistors to the Vietnam War, and particularly on Joan Baez and her husband at the time, David Harris, who was head of the resistance, and the whole relationship of the civil rights movement to the war resistance movement, which was pretty unknown to me when I started. So it's been an interesting journey of 7 years to make this film. So very happy to be here and pretending I'm at Lincoln Center instead of in my spare room.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd like to invite Harlan to introduce yourself, please. Sorry, Harlan, I can't quite hear you. I'm not sure if you're...
There we go. How's that?
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Good. I'm Harlan Bosmajian. I'm out here in Boston, Massachusetts, and I've worked as a cinematographer for about 30 years, and I'm currently a professor at Emerson College, teaching cinematography. And in transit, my short film, it was my second short film, and actually my first short film, Early Morning, was in the first socially relevant film festival. I guess it was 8 years ago. And so it's great to be back, and look forward to watching the film with you all.
Great, thank you. And lastly, David, could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, I'm David Torres from Mexico City. I'm a filmmaker, the director of the Buffalo Man, and I have been directing like 20 years, but this is my first feature film. and I don't know, Victoria.
Okay, wonderful. Victoria, would you like to jump in as well?
Hi, I'm Victoria Ariano, and I'm the producer of The Buffalo Men.
Okay, wonderful. Great. So first off, I would like to invite the filmmakers to please talk about your film and just give the audience an insight into how the idea for the film came about. David, perhaps you'd like to go first.
Okay, the idea came like 4 years ago, that many journalists were disappearing. This thing has been growing up, but I really want to make a voice for all these journalists, and I started the film alone. I did the photography, the production, mostly everything. But at some point, I couldn't handle it, so I called Victoria, and she came to rescue me and put the project in form. You know, it's a very particular film because it's a mockumentary, and it has a lot of good actors on it. If Victoria want to say something.
Hi, everybody. David, thank you for inviting me to your film. Yes, it was like a particular way of producing because David had already his first cut of the film, and he showed it to me, and I loved it. And from there on, it started like a very long post-production process. We had many cuts, many editions of the film, and at some points we just decided that we had to stop at some point, and we began with the post-production, color grading, sound design, etc., etc. And I think we are both very happy with the results, and well, all the crew, all the cast, and it's like our baby that had many difficulties to be born, but at last here it is, and we hope you like it.
Thank you, and it's an incredible film, as are all the others featured. Judith, could you please speak to how the idea for your film came about?
There. This film, actually, I was hired to make this film in the beginning. I was hired to do interviews at a reunion of 70 war resistors who had gotten together at David Harris's house in Mill Valley, California. And once I got through this process of interviewing many of them, I just felt like there was a film there that was way beyond what they had just wanted to do a document of that day. And we started raising money. Christopher Colorado Jones, who was the producer and has since a year ago died in a tragic accident, and we lost Christopher. And his husband, Bill, became the producer to get us through to the end. But the film was totally funded by first Kickstarter and then just donations from over 1,000 people, well over 1,000 people donated to make the film, and a few grants, but no major funding. And it was it was a committee process to begin with an amazing bunch of devoted people who knew the subject well. And I thought it was going to be a nightmare, but it turned out to be a wonderful experience in general with the committee. And we just, it kept, it went through many responses and had a lot of input from a lot of people to get it to this point. And it was a great process.
Sounds incredible. Thank you. Harlan, perhaps you'd like to speak to the process behind your film and how you arrived at the idea.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, let's see. The story for In Transit, I actually heard of the original version was a show on NPR on the Moth radio, where they which are basically short stories told by individuals live. And the story for In Transit was a story by a gentleman named Jay Dixit, who was a writer, and he was telling the story. It was a father and son story, and kind of about how they come together for this kind of profound moment at the Newark airport when the father is traveling to India to see his mother who is dying. And I heard the story on NPR and was really moved by it. And I contacted Jay, found him, online, and contacted him and asked him if I could make a film about his story. And luckily, he said yes. And then there was a period of time, probably several years, before I actually was able to kind of get the money together and the people together to make the film. So the producer was one of my graduate students, Jasraj Padye, and it was sort of through collaborating with him that I was able to make the film.
Incredible. Thank you. Nelson, could you please talk about the idea behind your film and how you came to it?
Sure, glad to. Our film, Acts of Resistance, is the fourth film that we've done on heavy metal music in Latin American region. I've been doing academic research in the region for the last 10 years in this particular style of music. And our first films were very much geared towards an understanding of how musical scenes emerged throughout the region. But as we continued to travel, it became evident that people in the region were using the music to not just for entertainment purposes, but rather to intervene in their social context. And I was very interested on this idea of how a musical genre that has been vilified throughout the decades, ever since its emergence in heavy emergence during the 70s and 80s, actually became a tool for social protest. And as the more I traveled, the more it became evident. So the film covers how metal musicians use metal music in Ecuador to protest anti-mining, to join anti-mining efforts in protesting the consequences of open-air mining in their country. The way metalheads in Guatemala use the music to actually impact rural schools that have been negatively impacted by the armed conflict in the region. And we also cover the use of metal music in Colombia to actually foster historical memory in terms of the coping with the violence that the country has suffered for the last 6 decades. So it's very much a film about using music in a way that most people don't think it's actually used, to have people understand the context in which it's embedded and actually engage in strategies to transform it.
That's incredible. Thank you, everyone, for going into the idea, how you arrived at the ideas. That was fascinating. My next question is, how did you find out about the socially relevant film festival, and why did you think your film would be a good fit for this festival? So I'd like to invite Judith to speak on this first. Thank you.
Socially relevant. Yes, I've never been accused of anything but being socially relevant. Not always the best thing to be, but it sort of feels right. It's the films I've made have always been about something. Well, the last three have been about nonviolence, and I'm making one now about the free speech on the internet. But they're all related to the issues of people who really about one person standing up and being willing to take a lot of risk. And the one I made before this was The Most Dangerous Man in America, Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers. And that he's also a character in this new film, in The Boys Who Said No. So I've tried to really follow this thread of what makes people stand up and be willing to be the first one or the only one who's willing to just go to prison, or, well, mostly go to prison in the last three films. And it's just, I think that idea of one individual can make a difference is really an important one in terms of any social change. That there's got to be one or a few people who are willing to really take a major risk, and then everyone else can flood in behind them. But you don't need hundreds of thousands of people to go to prison. You just need, in this case, 4,000 went to prison, but 500,000 resisted the draft. So it just takes that vanguard. And I think trying to get the core of what it takes to be one of those people in the vanguard is what I've tried to capture.
That's incredible. Thank you for that. I also realized that, Tinh, I'm so sorry I skipped you in our introduction. So perhaps you'd like to jump in and introduce yourself. My apologies.
Hi, how's everybody? Thank you for having me here. I'm the director of the Sanh Peace Garden. I'm a child of war. I escaped Vietnam when I was 12 years old, just a few days before the fall of Saigon. I've been living in the US for 30-something years. I've been living in Vietnam now for 10 years. And I met the subject in my movie, Dave Hansen, medevac helicopter pilot, when he was spending several years in Vietnam, in Khe Sanh, seeking reconciliation with his former enemies, and get over his personal view about the war when he was stationed in Khe Sanh. So yeah, I'm more of a musician than a filmmaker, but because I met Dave when he used one of my pieces of music for one of the movies that he was working on. And after meeting the veterans from both sides of the war, Dave gave me a private tour through the Khe Sanh base, where the horrible fighting and everything were happening there. And it was really interesting for me, being a child of war, to listen to Dave's side of the story and listen to all the stories. And just by walking through the compound itself, you know, all these war stuff that I've been putting away for years just kind of came back to me, and it hit me really hard. And all the emotion and everything. And as we are walking through over there, you can feel the souls of the soldiers that were, you know, still there. And I turned to Dave and I said, "Is it all right if I make a documentary about you?" And he said, "Yeah, okay." So that's how my film got started.
Amazing, thank you. And Tinh, could you also tell us how you found out about the socially relevant film festival and why you thought this film would be a good fit for the festival?
Oh, like most people, I go through Film Freeway, and when I ran across your film festival, I was like, you know, I really wanted to be in this this film festival. This is what the movie is about.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Harlan, could you please speak to how you arrived at the Socially Relevant Film Festival? Harlan, I think you're muted. Yeah, there we go.
Well, there we go. Well, I'd met Nora during the first Socially Relevant Film Festival when it was in New York, and I think that, you know, my film is a pretty, it feels like something any of us could go through in some form with people in our families, and it's more about how I guess how, like, just developing empathy and compassion can start on such a small personal level, and, you know, be something that is applicable on much larger context, social context as well. But in some ways, it kind of, you know, a struggle with a parent can be almost as, feel at least as big as a struggle for a political cause. And so learning to kind of have empathy for each other is always a topic that's interested me in films. And I found that when I heard the story on the moth, that it was really something that was right for me as a filmmaker. Yeah. I was interested, like I was trying to figure out how it came to be in a section called Forms of Protest, the film, and you know, in that grouping. That actually made me think about the film a little bit, and how, like, you know, we kind of protest in some ways against the familial stereotypes that get applied to us. And I think my film is kind of about that, and so it kind of fits into the Socially Relevant Film Festival well in that way.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I think the ways in which, you know, the personal and the political intersect both in your films and the rest of the films showcased here is incredible. David and Victoria, could you talk about how you arrived at the Socially Relevant Film Festival, please?
Well, here in Mexico, we don't have a festival that goes in that direction. So I basically searched for it, found it, and that's it.
Wonderful. Victoria, did you have something to add to that as well?
Yes, maybe that, yes, like David says, there's not like a festival in Mexico that goes through these specific themes and subjects. So when we watched that this festival existed and that our film fitted there, we wanted to be here. So thank you for selecting our film. And I think that, as David said at the beginning of when we introduced our film, we really think that this is a pressing matter in our country, because Mexico is only in third place of the most dangerous countries to be a journalist in, just behind Afghanistan, just behind Syria, and we are not a country at war, as you may say. So it's like a really pressing matter for us that we wanted to say and talk about in this way that I think is a creative way that David found to tell this story, which is with a mockumentary, because could be anyone, no, any journalist in that could be in that position. So that's why we think it's very good and feels good to be in this festival.
Yeah, it's really aptly expressed. Thank you. My next question for the panelists is, what are your expectations after the festival in terms of the future of your film, its journey, its impact, and its distribution? So, Nelson, if you could speak to that, please.
Sure. Well, we approach our films as a very community-based oriented project. So we get support from the university to actually go back to the sites where we recorded and give, hand out copies of the film to the communities that were part of it, and then have discussions with them about the content of the film. So we really do make an effort to make these films freely available to the communities that take part in them, and it's our way of engaging in discussion. So it's a very kind of like third cinema, Latin American perspective on documentary filmmaking, where you go back and have conversations with people. It's not just about people watching a movie; it's about people having a conversation about what's in them, how they feel reflected or not in it, and how can that discussion actually generate more reflections and actions geared towards social change in the themes that we're addressing. So I'm not too concerned about Hollywood distribution. I am more concerned about community engagement and community discussion, which is the main goal for us.
Yeah, amazing. Community engagement for sure is essential. Judith, how do you see your film evolving, or what do you see as the future journey of your film?
Well, it's such an unusual year that everything I've done in the past has sort of been thrown out the window and reconsidered. So I think we're going to definitely, community screenings is going to be a big part of what we're going to do with this film. We've got a distributor who's all set up to do that, and we're also going to do some ourselves before we start with that educational distributor. I've done theatrical with my other films, but I'm not going to do that this time. It's just not worth bothering. I think the theaters are still empty as far as I can tell. So we're, although they are open here in Australia, but it's still very small. So I think we've got a distributor interested in Europe and we've got one in the US for doing broadcast sales in both of those regions. And then we'll do educational, do community screenings, but I think we might try doing more forewalling of the film in communities where there's interest, and really expand that part of it, which we haven't done in the past. Maybe, and also putting as theaters open, but also just doing that virtually through. We might use Show and Tell, this platform that Peter Broderick and his partner Keith, I can't remember Keith's last name, but it's a really good model, and they're just doing another course for anyone who wants to see that. They do courses on distribution that are pretty interesting. How to do community distribution, get your film out to a larger audience. And I can put that up on the chat when I remember what the heck it's called. but I've learned a lot from them.
Perfect. Thank you, Judith. Tin, what about you? How do you see the future of your film?
Yes, I mentioned before, I'm a musician before I am a filmmaker, I'm waiting for this pandemic to be over, and I like to take an international tour, playing concert. I actually wrote all the music for the whole soundtrack to the movie. I actually can play the whole soundtrack while the movie is playing. So I'm interested in performing, doing tours in colleges and things like that. I've done that before for my other films. So I like to do that with this film. And I think it has a really nice message to say. Instead of a, historical film about the Vietnam War, this is more like it's sort of like a celebration of peace. And so I really like to send that message out by performing and screening the films.
Wonderful, thank you. Harlan, could you speak to the future of your film, please?
Yes. Sorry, I was just texting with one of the actors in the film, Avinash. Hello, Avinash. I wish I could see you. So yeah, which brings up, like, one of the things I loved about making the film was working with mostly a Boston-based talent and crew. Another actress in the film, Kate Jurdy, was working with us, and Vedant Gokale, and it that was one of my, just a really wonderful opportunity that I want to keep expanding on, is working with Boston-based talent, and really I just want to get the film into as many festivals as I can. I mean, it's a small narrative film, of which there's so many out there, and so just being able to get it into festivals and seen in the world is great. Plus, I really enjoy adapting literary short stories. I think it's such a kind of right place for amazing content for short films, and something I encourage my students to do. So I like using the film as a teaching tool as well.
Incredible. Thank you. David, what do you think about the future of your film?
Of course, I want distribution. Sorry, but the main thing for me is that many people as possible can see my film. Because I think all our subjects are social, and it's the thing that we want, that the message go to everywhere, to the lower, to the higher people. That's really important for me, that everyone can see my film.
Definitely. And Victoria, do you have thoughts on the future of the film?
No, nothing more to add than what just David said.
Okay, great. So the subject of this panel is protest and resistance. So I'd just like to invite the filmmakers to speak to how your film deals with protest and resistance, and the personal and the political, like we've talked about, and the intersections of that. If you could just speak to the broader thematic issue, that would be wonderful. And Nelson, if you could go first, that'd be great.
Sure. I mean, I don't know how to de-link the movie Acts of Resistance from the topic of protest, because I think everything that they're doing is a form of protest. I think what's different is that we're dealing with a musical genre that has been vilified for many decades, particularly in Latin America, where it has been interpreted for a long time as a strategy for the Americanization of youth in the region. But when you see people using music to fight violence, to fight mining companies, to foster education in their settings, I mean, I think it's a different way of looking at this musical genre, and it's an invitation for people, and an invitation for me as a professor, and for my students, and for music listeners and people who love music, to try to find strategies that younger generations are using to protest about their conditions that they're living through, that some people might find, unbelievable or unusable. Like, most people don't think that heavy metal music is a form of protest, but when you look at it in detail and how they're being used in Latin America, it's exactly what it is. So it's an invitation to look at sites of social protest that we haven't looked at before, because then we kind of broaden the spectrum of how we can impact change in our societies. And this is just one way in which the youth in Latin America are actually engaging in it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Tin, as a musician and a filmmaker, I'm wondering if you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, I think, well, with the war, my film is like a branch of Judith's film. And to the war itself is a protest. I mean, Judith's film would just cover all of that pretty much. My film, it's kind of like the protest comes after the film. You know, because the Vietnam War is so powerful, was so intense. It's weird to see it from so many different sides, from the people who said no to going into the war, to the people who went to the war, to the people who were in the war, and everybody is all affected. And so when my, you know, when I screen my movie, it's like you hear the voices from the people and all their feelings and emotions and all the gamut that they went through coming up, and they protested in a different way. At a personal level.
That's, yeah, for sure, incredible. Judith, perhaps you'd like to comment on that?
Yes, in fact, Tin, I'd like to talk to you about, I really want to take this film to Vietnam, and we've had an invitation from the Reconciliation Museum there to do that. And oh, I'm sorry, am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay.
No, you're okay.
I should have been. I was very quiet. The thing that surprised me, I feel like I've been really lucky that the Ellsberg film came out just as Julian Assange appeared on the horizon. There hadn't been a whistleblower, a public whistleblower, in 40 years. This film, which has been around for a long time, came out right when the Black Lives Matter movement arose. And I feel like it's been, it's really resonated with young resistors and people who are practicing civil disobedience and nonviolent civil disobedience particularly. And we've gotten a lot of interest from Extinction Rebellion groups, and there's 50, we haven't started doing community screenings, but we've got 50 organizations have asked for community screenings, and we're really seeing it's resonating with young people who are finding a model for how to, using this as a playbook for how to do nonviolent civil disobedience. So that's really exciting. And the last film came out just at the time it ended up inspiring Edward Snowden to release his secrets when he saw our film about Daniel Ellsberg's secrets. So that's like I was very excited about that. That feels like real impact to me, and I'm hoping that something like that happens with this film. Not exactly, but
That's incredible. Yeah, David, do you have thoughts on that?
But will help me to translate if that's okay with you. Para mí es muy importante que esta película cobre mucha vida, porque el periodismo en México no es que no exista, sí hay periodismo muy importante, pero casi todo está aplastado. Y si el periodismo no nos protege a nosotros como ciudadanos, entonces no hay protesta, pues. Entonces es la única forma de que los ciudadanos común y corriente tengan un acceso real a la política. Y en ese sentido mi película habla de eso, ¿no? Es una protesta acerca de eso.
What David said is that the Buffalo Man. See, I'm not muted, no?
No, you're okay.
Yes, that what David said is that this film is he thinks that the protest in it is that journalism is in a crisis. I think not only in Mexico, but everywhere with this fake news and all this disinformation that is going on. And we feel that right now in Mexico, journalism is in a very manipulated way, because you never know who is with who, and And David thinks that journalism is a way that citizens can be really involved in politics, with knowing actual facts, with journalism that is correct. So David says that if we don't have like a good journalism in our countries, we don't really know the truth or things that are close to the truth, and we cannot participate in politics. So that is why we think that the form of protest is oriented in that way in journalism.
Thank you for that answer. And lastly, Harlan, I know you spoke to this earlier, but could you talk about protest and resistance in your film, please?
Yeah, I think that while I've been listening to everyone's answers, I've been trying to think of how my film addresses protests, and I feel like the only way that it does is sort of the protest against oneself, maybe. How we sometimes need to, yes, protest or rebel against our own natures, and to create some sort of change within ourselves. Yeah, I think that's
also. Can I interject on that? Maybe I can bring my point of view as to why it was put in this section. It's also the protest of the son to the father and the traditions.
Yes,
and
it
not
is.
accepting a certain way of life and standing up to accepted forms of behavior. So it could be a protest on the family level, the personal level, and the societal and political level. So that was my way of thinking, just in case you're wondering what you're doing here.
No, Nora, I knew you had an eloquent explanation for that, so I'm glad you you took that one over. Thank you.
Anyway, all right. Have we done the round? Can I read some of the questions?
Yes.
Okay, so we have some people here who have come up with fantastic questions. And first of all, let me say that we have, Avinash Padier, your actor, says hello. It's in the chat. And then somebody's asking Harlan a question. But I'm going to come back to that later, because there is a more general question which I think very interesting for everybody to address. Michael Claes, who is a socially relevant film festival team member and also a board member, he's saying every potential juror in the George Floyd trial right now is being asked the difference between a protest and a riot. How would you answer that? And this is a question that every one of you can answer. And the question that was addressed to Harlan says, do you think empathy can be taught, or is it only innate? So whoever, I leave it to Neha to decide how to, should Harlan ask first, or should we take a round and discuss the difference between protest and riot in terms of the films?
I think I can address that because there's a very clear distinction in my mind, which is the difference between violence and nonviolence, and I think it can be taught, and it has been taught, and that's the message of the nonviolent civil disobedience, which clearly can be taught and is a method. And one line in the film, which I really like, is from Mark Rudd, who was a member of the Weather Underground, committed to violent overthrow of the United States, and who evolved into a very strong nonviolence advocate. And he says nonviolence is the message of the 20th century, and I think that really is true, that we do now know how to behave nonviolently. It's a lot harder to do that, but it certainly is a way to have real social change, because violence really never has changed anything, but nonviolence has.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an incredible answer. I'm wondering if Harlan would like to respond, or if anyone else would like to jump in on that.
I'll just mention that I think it's an interesting question that's being asked. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's being asked in our times, because there is a strong criminalization of protest going on, and it's an active criminalization of protest. And people who are engaged in, people like us who are engaged in discussions about social justice, I think we need to be really careful about, criminalizing violence, because violence needs to be understood, not criminalized. And when violence is manifested as part of social protest, it's important to think about the factors that put it there, and the factors that actually motivate people to engage in that type of protest, rather than criminalize people for engaging in it. So, I mean, it's a thin line to walk, but it's important to walk it as a filmmaker, as a professor, as a social scientist, because there have been, the reflections on violence and social protests have been present in a lot of decolonial struggles throughout the Americas, and some of them have been very, very valid. So it's important to walk a line of exploring the tensions, the contradictions, but also the possibilities, and understand why it's being asked now, because it's another strategy of control of populations that are going to be, potentially acting as social actors in the future. So it's a tricky line to walk, but it's important to do so.
I'm curious what you all think. If did you perceive the kind of taking over of Congress as a act of protest or a riot? I'm curious.
How do you perceive it, Harlan?
That's a tricky question. Depends on which side you're standing on.
Right. All right.
Wow, very tricky.
It's really tricky.
It's really tricky, but it really isn't tricky. I mean, it isn't tricky. Part of what we need to, this is the taking of position, right?
Right.
When you engage in protest related to something that's abhorrently false, then it's not a tricky decision. It just takes people to take a position and say, there's a lie running around the country that motivates certain actions, and then we can't stand back and just say, well, it depends on the position that you take. No, it doesn't. There are facts and there are non-facts. So that's also a very important thing to take into consideration when we discuss protests, riots, and the events in the Capitol.
I couldn't agree more with you, but from the point of view of the person who's defending the other side, he would say, no, wait a minute, that was our right. And I'm getting stuck with words. All the voting, all the whatever, it was all rigged. And then, of course we had to protest and so on and so forth. And then, yeah, I know that is the lie, and we know where the truth lies. But yeah.
And sometimes I think, and Nelson, I agree with you. In my opinion, that it was a wrong act to do, but it provokes a deeper questioning of the opinions of a lot of people in this country, and it forces, I think, people who are on the left more to ask the question, why did this happen? Who could possibly do this, and why does this happen? And I think that if we say that they are just, wrong or categorize them in some way, it doesn't make anything. It doesn't solve anything. I don't know what
See, that's
No, I agree. I agree with your point, Harlan. But then again, if people are asking themselves why did this happen, they haven't been here for the last 4 years. I mean, where have they been? You know, and the other thing that I would push back on was when you mentioned that a lot of people. I mean, you have to think about the number and determine if what happened there was a lot of people or not. I mean, people living in the U.S. Need a wake up call in terms of the role of empire on the world. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. behaves as an empire in the world. So the U.S. promotes strategies like the one that they lived through on the 6th in other parts of the world. Just look at what happened in Bolivia recently. Mm-hmm. So it's not surprise to me at all that given the history of the U.S. in the world, the way that the government behaved in the last 4 years, and the current state of affairs in the U.S., nobody should be surprised that this is happening. Absolutely no one. Absolutely. And we really do need to reflect on, and I would argue we really do need to reflect on, it's one thing to understand why it happens, and it's another different thing to tacitly accept what is happening in a passive manner, because we just...
Also, there are certain limits and lines that even when you're making a protest and you're addressing some violent forms of protest because you want to make your voice heard, there has to be a certain way of expression, a certain ethic to the way a protest is conducted. Because if it's riotous in that sense, that happened on the 6th of January, and there is an incitement behind it, which is based on lies and anti-democratic ends, then we know what the answer is. But if we're talking about, yes, but am I on this side or am I on that side? There's always two sides of everything. But we're not talking about what happened on January 6th in particular. We know the answer to that, but we're talking in general as to there's always the point of view of the person who's looking at it.
I think January 6th was kind of an unusual situation in that the president of the United States sent his, gave permission to this group of people to break the doors and windows of the Congress and to break in and to do damage and to threaten the lives of the Congress. So, I mean, that was, let's hope that doesn't happen again. But that was a coup, an attempted coup in my mind, not even a riot. I mean, that sort of goes beyond anything we've seen in this country, and much more, as Nelson said, like we've seen in other countries. And, it was like, how could this possibly be happening? Well, we've been through 4 years of really disruptive governance, and that was the end result of it. And I kind of, in a way, looking back on it now, it is sort of cleared the air and made clear what this government was about and how dangerous it was.
I know.
Maybe it had a positive, and the end result may have been positive, because we can't deny how crazy things have gotten when we see that, what happened on January 6th.
Crazy and totally out of hand. I mean, it's like it was every day we were on our Twitters to find out what is the next stupidity that's going to be thrown at us. It's like, come on, how much of that can you take? And then to come back and want another 4 years of that? Excuse me, sorry. So
but I think part of the challenge, and I very much appreciate Judith's comment, part of the challenge here is to stop looking at ourselves. As the U.S. needs to stop looking at itself as if it's the center of the world. The U.S. needs to understand that these are practices that the government itself promotes elsewhere. So you can't, I mean, to me it's almost kind of funny when people say, how could this have happened here? And then you say, well, this happens everywhere in the world. It's promoted by different governments, powerful governments throughout the world. So nobody who's informed enough should be actually surprised, right?
Yeah. I am going to be very bad. And unfortunately, just as we're getting into this very heavy and beautiful political everybody thinks politics is a bad word, but socially engaged, let me say, conversation. I'm going to say, unfortunately, we need to wrap up because it's 5 o'clock exactly. And at 5:30, we have another session that starts, which is 10 minutes each, which we are going to read from the finalist scriptwriters. We have a script writing competition, and we always select the finalists. We have 5 finalists selected this year, of which the jury decides 3 winners, and they are given awards and prizes and things like that. But the 5 get a chance to have 10 minutes from their script read out with actors, which obviously we're going to do on Zoom. So that's our next session. So if anybody wants to say a quick word before we go off air so that I can go to my next other computer and open the Zoom and get the actors to come in. So please feel free.
Thank you so much, Nora. Really appreciate being a part of your festival. It's been a great experience. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. I'm rotating.
Yes, many thanks to the festival.
Thank you so much. And in turn, I want to thank you all as the filmmakers. I don't know if I did that in this session because I keep doing it in every session and I forget which session I mentioned it already and which session I didn't. I cannot thank you filmmakers enough, not only for the films you made that are in our section, but for the engaged positions you're taking in telling stories that make a difference in the world, that shine the spotlight on issues that a lot of people might not even know exist sometimes, and we are learning through these films. Anybody else wants to interject?
Just want to say thank you, Nora, and thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Neha, for moderating. It was really a pleasure having you. And again, thank you for Honeysuckle Magazine for sponsoring our festival again. I mean, again, this is the first time, sorry, this year. They are one of our media partners. Yes, Harlan, you wanted to say something. No? Yes?
No, just thanks, Nora, and we could have probably gone on for another couple of hours in that debate coming up there.
I know, but
no, it's great. That's
idea.
the kind of thing that makes this great, right?
Absolutely. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., every day we have from 10 to 11, we have a Cine Cafe hour, where it is open on Zoom link. Everybody can come in with their coffee mug or whatever drink they prefer. And then we can chat and get to know each other. You can talk about your film. You can discuss anything we want, like the riot or the protest or what happened on July 6th. And thank God it's not going to happen again, hopefully, ever. And all those things. And then we also have happy hour, happy Cine hour, I've called it, every other day, not every day. So the next one is tomorrow from 6 to 7. So you're all welcome. And then whoever is the filmmaker that's present on that day will get the spotlight and they can speak and talk about their next project or anything they like to talk about. So thank you all very much. And I think I'm going to end the broadcast because we're already 4 minutes over. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.